Bad Bunny, a man who has never released a song in English, who has never chased a mainstream American crossover, who has never asked the United States music industry for permission to be great, is the second most streamed artist in the entire history of Spotify. Not of his genre, not of his generation, not of Latin music, of the entire platform. Every artist, every language, every era of streaming. Second place, globally, all time. And somehow, this fact gets mentioned in articles and then immediately scrolled past like it is a normal thing that makes complete sense and requires no further examination. It is not normal. It does not make complete sense on paper, and it absolutely requires further examination. So that is exactly what is happening right now. To understand what Bad Bunny actually represents, not just as an artist, but as a cultural event that the US music industry is still quietly trying to reverse engineer, you have to go back to the rule that existed before he arrived and broke it so completely that people forgot it was ever a rule. Shh, turn the volume up, but keep it low. This is Rap Deepest Secrets, the one place the labels can't control, exposing the codes, the cover-ups, the real cost of fame. Now back to the video. For decades, the operating assumption at the center of the American music business was straightforward and largely unquestioned. If you wanted to be global, if you wanted the biggest stages and the mainstream cultural recognition and the kind of numbers that get you on lists and in history books, you had to speak English. Or at minimum, you had to make English-speaking audiences the primary target. You could be successful in your lane, you could be celebrated within your community, but crossover, real crossover, the kind that puts you on Billboard and in arenas and in conversations with the biggest names in any genre, required translation, required adaptation, required meeting the American market on its own terms. That was the deal. Nobody wrote it down, nobody announced it in a meeting, but it shaped careers, label strategies, radio formats, and the entire infrastructure of how music moved across cultural lines for longer than most current listeners have been alive. Bad Bunny did not negotiate with that deal. He did not find a clever workaround or a strategic middle ground. He simply operated as if the rule did not exist, and then watched the rule collapse around him while he kept moving. His first major releases were entirely in Spanish. His sound was rooted specifically in reggaeton and Latin trap, genres that American radio had categorized as niche, regional, culturally specific in ways that the mainstream was not designed to absorb at scale. His lyrics were about real, specific Puerto Rican life, love and heartbreak and identity and pride in a cultural context that had no obligation to explain itself to anyone who did not already understand it. And American listeners, young American listeners specifically, lost their minds for it anyway. Not because Bad Bunny translated anything, because he did not because he softened anything or made it more digestible, because he made it more himself, more specific, more rooted, and the specificity is exactly what translated, the truth underneath the language, the emotional honesty underneath the cultural references, the feeling underneath the words that crossed every boundary the industry had spent decades insisting could not be crossed without the right adjustments. The numbers are where the story becomes impossible to argue with, and this is the part that the music industry's most powerful institutions are still sitting with in rooms that the public does not have access to. Bad Bunny became the first non-English language artist to top the Billboard Global 200, and he did not do it once as a fluke, he did it for weeks. He has had multiple albums reach #1 on the Billboard 200 in the United States, albums recorded entirely in Spanish, released without a single English language concession to the American market. His concert tickets sell out in minutes. His Spotify streams run into the billions. He has performed at the Super Bowl halftime show. He has been placed on the New York Times list of the greatest living American songwriters. every one of those achievements was supposed to be structurally unavailable to an artist who refused to make the accommodations the industry believed were required for that level of success. And yet, every single one of them happened anyway, not despite his refusal to adapt, arguably because of it. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that explains why US fans specifically have the relationship with Bad Bunny that they do, which is not a simple or easily categorized thing. The United States has the largest Hispanic population of any country outside of Latin America. Millions of young Americans grew up with Spanish as a first or second language, with Latin music as the soundtrack to family gatherings and celebrations and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. For those listeners, Bad Bunny was never a crossover story. He was never an artist they had to be introduced to through a mainstream American filter. He was already home before he was a headline. But the reach goes well beyond that community, and this is the genuinely fascinating part of his US dominance. Young American listeners of every background, many of whom do not speak Spanish and grew up with no particular connection to Latin culture, found their way to Bad Bunny's music through TikTok, through Spotify algorithms, through friends playing it in cars and at parties, and stayed, not because they understood every word, but because the music communicated something that does not require translation. That cross-cultural gravitational pull is extraordinarily rare. It's the difference between an artist who has international fans and an artist who has built a genuinely global cultural identity. Bad Bunny is unambiguously in the second category. And then there's the cultural dimension that sits underneath the streaming numbers and the chart positions and deserves its own conversation because it's the part that matters most in the long run. Bad Bunny has used his platform, one of the largest platforms any artist in the world currently has, to talk about things that popular music at his level of commercialism typically avoids. Mental health, identity, the complexity of what it means to be Puerto Rican in a world that has historically treated Puerto Rican culture as peripheral to the main conversation. His music doesn't simplify these things into digestible, radio-friendly emotional shorthand. It sits inside the complexity and lets it be complicated. For young Latinx listeners in the United States, a generation navigating identity questions in a country where Hispanic culture is simultaneously everywhere and consistently treated as secondary, that specificity is not just appreciated, it's necessary. It's the sound of someone at the absolute top of the global music industry saying, without apology and without translation, that this culture is worth celebrating exactly as it is. Not adapted, not softened, not made easier for anyone who is not already part of it. That message, delivered at that volume with that level of cultural credibility, does something that streaming numbers and chart positions cannot fully capture. It gives permission. Permission to young people to be exactly and fully themselves in spaces that have historically asked them to be less. This right here, this exact kind of conversation where the numbers and the culture and the industry implications and the human reality all connect into something bigger than any single piece of the story is why this channel exists. And if you are not subscribed yet, you need to fix that right now. Hit that button because we do this every single time and you do not want to keep showing up late. Subscribe now and stay locked in. So what does all of this actually mean, practically, for the current moment and for where things go from here? It means the rule is gone. The English language requirement for American mainstream success is not a bending rule or a rule with exceptions. It is a broken rule. Bad Bunny broke it so thoroughly and so publicly that the industry cannot quietly reassemble it. The infrastructure that was built around the assumption of English language dominance in American popular music is being rebuilt in real time, and Bad Bunny's career is the most prominent evidence of why that reconstruction was necessary. It means that young American listeners, particularly the generation that grew up with streaming as their primary relationship with music, have a fundamentally different relationship with language, culture, and authenticity in music than any previous generation. They found Bad Bunny. They chose him. They kept choosing him, album after album, year after year, without any of the traditional mainstream machinery that was supposed to be required to reach them. They chose him because the music was real, and the realness crossed everything. And it means that Bad Bunny's dominance of US streaming and US pop culture is not an anomaly to be explained away. It is a preview, a very clear, very well-documented preview of what music looks like when authenticity is allowed to move at the speed of the internet, without the old gatekeeping structures slowing it down or redirecting it through filters designed for a different era. The second most streamed artist in Spotify history never recorded a song in English, never asked for permission, never made the accommodations the industry said were necessary. And the industry is still trying to figure out what to do with that information. Bad Bunny already moved on. Made it all the way here? You belong in this community. Subscribe to the channel, drop your thoughts in the comments about what Bad Bunny's dominance actually means for the future of music, and stay locked in, because the next breakdown is already coming. See you there!